Tubeless tires on the bike are so great that me, a self-proclaimed retrogrouch, has adopted this new technology for my own bike. But it's also one of the biggest pain-in-the-butt upgrades for your bike, and because of that, it's definitely not for everybody. And you should only go tubeless on your bike if you do these 5 things. And you should also check out this message from our sponsor, Wabi Cycles. For top-tier steel fixed gears that are meticulously handcrafted, that are the most fun bikes that I've ever thrown a leg over, be sure to check out Wabi Cycles, linked in the description, and stick around until the end of the video to learn more about them. Whether you ride in an area that's really thorny or you ride really gnarly terrain on low pressures and get pinch flats a lot, Tubeless can fix both of those problems. Any puncture, as long as it's not super big, the tubeless sealant can just fill up and you can continue riding. There's just something really satisfying about riding tubeless, getting a flat that would have been you pulling over to the side of the road and swapping out a tube, but hearing that and then it just completely goes away. And there's also moments where I've been riding in very rooty, rocky terrain, running lower pressure for better traction and better comfort, hitting a tree root hard, hitting a rim, and just being able to keep on riding because there's just simply no tube to get pinched. You can get significantly lower pressures without any fear of getting pinch flats on tubeless, and that can make them feel safer and more confidence-inspiring to ride. But tubeless is also one of the biggest pain-in-the-butt upgrades for your bike, and the first hurdle that you have to get over if you really want to go tubeless is you have to spend hundreds of dollars. From the gear that you have to get from tubeless compatible tires and trying to figure out which non-tubeless tires are actually tubeless compatible and which non-tubeless rims are tubeless compatible. And if you figure out that your gear doesn't work for tubeless, then you have to get tubeless specific rims. In my case, a whole ass tubeless compatible wheel set. Then you have to get tubeless rim tape, a lot of it, because if you're doing it yourself, you're probably gonna screw it up. I certainly did. And then there's all the tools that you need to install it if you're doing it yourself, which I recommend, like an air compressor, a valve core remover, tubeless bacon strips for fixing any tubeless flats that the sealants can't fill in, an apron if you're a messy person, and a copy of Spider-Man 2 for the PlayStation 2. It is a lot of stuff, and it can easily cost hundreds of dollars. I also recommend that you should only go tubeless if you're willing to work on it yourself, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong with a tubeless wheel set, and it just becomes really annoying to have to take it to a bike shop every single time there's a minor annoyance that can be easily fixed if you just look it up and have the tools to work on it yourself. With that said though, you should know that there is a very steep learning curve to learning how to do tubeless yourself. If putting a tube in a tire is like climbing on a 3% grade, learning how to do tubeless is like climbing on a 15% grade. It is tough, especially when you're first doing it out, because everything has to be just about perfect, from your rim tape to your tire and rim combo, to how well you cut the slot for the valve, to how well you spread the sealant around the tire, to how much air you're blasting into the tire, to your technique of how you hold the wheel when you are trying to seat the tire on a tubeless rim. And yeah, some tubeless tires and rim combinations are going to be easier than others to set up, but all of them are going to be significantly more difficult than just throwing a tube inside a tire. Tubeless tires are also a lot higher maintenance than their tubed counterparts. You have to top up the tire with sealant about once every 3 to 4 months, because the sealant dries out or the sealant burps out of the side, and eventually if you just keep riding that bike, you're going to go to a point where you don't have enough sealant to fill up any punctures. I had to learn that the hard way. And once you do finally get a puncture that sealant cannot fill up, it's a good idea to know how to work on your own bike and to know how the tubeless system works and how to fix it for the eventuality that you do get a puncture that the sealant cannot plug up. Because it is a huge pain in the butt, and you have to know your stuff and know how the tubeless system works. And you have to go full doctor mode when that happens. You have to think, is the tire still seated on the rim? Is there enough sealant in the tire? Was it a fast leak from a big puncture or a slow leak from a smaller puncture? Is my rim tape okay? Is my valve core leaking? Putting tubes in a tire is definitely easier and it's definitely more reliable. There are so many more things that can go wrong on the tubeless system that you should know how to fix. if you're ever out riding and something does go wrong, because something will go wrong, so you should know how to work on it. And if you're not willing to do that, tubeless probably isn't for you. And whatever bike you go tubeless on, you should ride it a lot. The tubeless system loses pressure a lot faster than a tube. There's one less layer that the air has to escape through. Air will leak out through the sidewalls, through the valve, and when you hit something really hard when you're riding the bike in little burps. For tires with tubes, I have to pump them up riding about 70 to 100 miles every week, about once every 2 weeks to once a week if I really want to top up the air. But on a tubeless system, again, it depends on the tire. I have to pump it up about once every 2 to 3 days. It's a lot of maintenance, and you really don't want to let the tire pressure get too low, because if it does, the tire could unseat, which is the last thing that you want to happen for your tubeless system, because getting the tire to seat is one of the biggest pains in the butt. Again, some tires are easier than others, but generally you don't want the tire to peel off of the rim and have to reseat the tire with an air compressor. And if you let the bike sit for too long and you don't ride it, the sealant inside will pool at the bottom and it can dry up. That'll give you a lopsided ride quality, and also that sealant isn't going to be filling any punctures. If that happens, you have to pull the tire off of the rim, which again is the last thing that you want to do. The only time that you want to pull the tire off of the rim with tubeless is when you're replacing a tire. You gotta scrape that old dried up sealant and put some new sealant in and reinstall the tire. Again, a big pain in the butt if you're not riding it a lot. And ideally, you should be riding whatever bike you have tubeless enough that you have to replace the tires every 6 months to a year. If you're not riding your bike that frequently, then tubeless probably isn't for you. If you're thinking about riding tubeless because you don't want to get punctures as often, and it's a cool thing that all your riding buddies are doing, actually think about the realistic experience of having tubeless and how much bigger of a pain in the butt it is than tubes. Tubes are great. I love tubes. I still even threw in a spare tube into my rear tire when the sealant didn't fill it up. Tubes are still comfortable, they're still fast, and they're way more reliable than a tubeless system. And if you're thinking that you're going to save time from fixing flats, going to tubeless, I would say you spend way more time setting up tubeless than you save fixing punctures. Tubeless is definitely a lot of headache, but if you do these 5 things, it's definitely worth it. I will likely not go back to tubes on my bike for the foreseeable future just because I like it so much. It's more comfortable, you get less flats, I can focus on riding my bike instead of working on my bike on the side of the road, and I can run lower pressures for gravelly, track low crossy stuff without any fears of getting pinch flats. And another huge benefit for me is that I can ride fast race tires without really worrying about getting too many flats. It's a lot of cost, it's a lot of setup, it's a lot of learning and a lot of trial and error and a lot of making mistakes, but tubeless is worth it for the right people. Speaking of things that are worth it for the right people, this video is sponsored by Wabi cycles. Wabis are the most fun bikes that I've ever ridden, period. And a big reason I only own one bike, and it's a Wabi, is because it's the best bike I've ridden. I don't need to own multiple bikes when I just want to ride the best bike. Part of the reason that makes Wabi so fun to ride is that they are meticulously handcrafted here in Taiwan. I'm in Taichung, Taiwan. I visited the factory. I'm super stoked about that video, and it was just really cool to meet the people that built my bike and to see Wabi specials being made. But anyway, they're meticulously handcrafted out of top tier and lightweight, springy and lively Reynolds 725 tubing or Columbus Spirit tubing, which is some of the lightest steel tubing that money can buy. And if you're super picky about your bike, Wabi's got you covered because you can choose every single component on your bike. You can customize down to the very fine details so that you can have your buttery smooth dream bike right out of the box. Thanks to Wabi for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check them out, linked in the description. A Fixie famous shoutouts to Julian Corona, Brandon Black, Brent David, Mario Perez, and Tad Onchi for making these videos possible through support on Patreon. And remember that life is short, but don't make it short, so be sure to ride your bike every day. to be reasonably dangerous.